Hey, this is Londell McMillan, and this is the Source Exclusive.
Let me see everybody raise up their hand. Before I go, I want to leave you with something. The easiest way for evil to prosper is for good people to do nothing. Stay woke.
America cannot be great without me, you, and all of us who are here today.
I'm here today with my dear friends and beloved comrades, and happy to have this conversation with Tamika Mallory and Mysonne the General. Two people who are extraordinary in their own right, but as a pair become unstoppable.
It's good to be with you, Londell. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, beloved?
I'm blessed, King. Good to see you.
Good to see you. You know, there's been a lot of work done in our community of late, which has been a very, very good thing, and we owe much of that work to activists in our community, particularly young activists who are standing on the shoulders of our elders.
Right.
And you too, I'm proud to say, are very much a part of that leadership. So first and foremost, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we're kind of old now too, though. We might be in the elder group a little bit.
The young OGs.
The young OGs.
Yeah.
But thank you. You know, I want to talk about what has inspired you and how we can actually continue to build on this movement and make social activism a part of popular culture.
Yeah.
But before we do that, why don't we just talk a little bit about, you know, your background and how you came to this point. So Tamika, if you don't mind, can you start?
Yeah, so, I kind of feel like you've been my mentor, in this work a long time. We've known one another and been involved in a lot of different movements. My parents have been activists since I was a little girl. When I was young, I always joke with people, especially when I'm talking to students, I thought it was like the curse of hell that I had to go to rallies and protest and all of that when I was very small. I wanted to skate and do the fun things that young people like to do. But my parents, really pretty much dragged me around the city of New York, engaged in all types of movement work. And then, my son's father was murdered. It's been about 18 years now, 17 years now. He was shot twice and left in a ditch before his body was discovered. I think it was about 2 weeks before he was found. And I think at that point, it kind of clicked for me what my parents had been exposing me to all my life. I was, I was really intrigued by why did this happen to him, and not the why, he was with some dudes and somebody killed him, but more so of the why, why are so many young black men dying this way? Because I found out that I was a part of a club. It was a big club, a lot of young women raising kids without their fathers. And so as I began to do that work, I found that gun violence was directly connected to poverty in our community, lack of education, police brutality, all the issues that my parents had been exposing me to, and sort of zeroed in for me. And that's when I decided to accept the movement as my own. And I just started, actively engaged. They didn't have to drag me anymore. I was on my way to rallies and involved. But I think I always wanted to kind of be cool still. And so I had to create a space where you could still have fun and, and be turned up, if you will, but also aware and conscious of what's going on in the movement. And so we've been working to create that for a long time now.
And in terms of the kind of jobs that you've had in this space, why don't you share with our audience where you work?
So I was with Reverend Al Sharpton for 14 years, and that's where we met. I was, there 14 years or so. My parents have been members of Reverend Sharpton's organization. They were the first two people to help him start National Action Network. He had a small group of folks, and I was very young growing up with Reverend, and he certainly has been a mentor and learned a lot from him. The last 4 years before I left to start my own business, I was his executive director. So we went from, Reverend Al, the guy with the tracksuits on, all the way to him being on MSNBC, 5 days a week, being in the White House and all the things that we see about him and his great leadership and how he evolved, I like to say that I was a part of that transition, working from a young girl all the way up to, becoming an adult in that movement. So that's one thing I did. And I did a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I've worked at the grocery store all the way to like Michael Hardy, the lawyer's office, as the receptionist. I've done a lot of jobs, but NAN was pretty much my foundation.
And then the Justice League, I think you started doing work in the movement.
Yeah, so after, when I left National Action Network, really kind of like finding my way, and I became a board member for the Gathering for Justice. It's called the Gathering for Justice. That's the parent organization. Harry Belafonte is the founder of the Gathering. Carmen Perez is our executive director. I became a board member, which I still am today, a proud board member. And Carmen started Justice League exactly for what we talked about. Like, you want to be in the movement, but you still want to be cool and like have a good time. Because sometimes people think being in the movement means you like old and you don't go to parties no more. You're like the little church mouse, and that's not really true. You can actually enjoy your life and bring those fun things to the movement. So art and entertainment was a part of what we wanted to see. That was the movement we wanted to create. And she really wanted to give a platform for us to have that. And so she started Justice League NYC with some other folks, Angelo Pinto, Marvin Bing, and I became a part of it. It's really around the Eric Garner movement.
Okay.
I got really, really engaged, and that's kind of where I met this guy.
This is God's work. This is God's work. I wasn't always eating. I had to start first. Had to go through.
Let's talk about this guy. This guy that the hip hop world knows for sure. Mysonne, tell us about your journey.
I started out as an artist, hip hop artist. In 1998, I was signed by the late great Chris Lighty to Unviolated Def Jam, which shortly after I was signed to that record deal, I was incarcerated. I was incarcerated for armed robbery, for 2 armed robbery cases that I really didn't do. Ended up getting sentenced to 7 to 14 years. Did 7 out of 14 years. Came home in the year of 2006. And when I came home, it was just a newfound reality. Mass incarceration is serious, and there was a lot of young black males that were just coming in like it was a revolving door. And I understood why, because coming from the inner city, coming from the Bronx, coming from poverty, it was a myth that being incarcerated was some type of badge of honor. And we have been taught that you wasn't real or you wasn't quote unquote gangster unless you went to jail and you did some time, and that gave you some level of credibility. And then going to prison, actually realized that there's nothing in prison but a bunch of guys that's trying to get out, and some guys that's too scared to be in society that they just stay in there because they don't have to work and they don't have to do anything. I realized that I had been misinformed, that I had been lied to, that I had been taught to believe something that wasn't real. So my whole thing coming back into society, being a rapper, understanding how the messages that we put in our music dictate what happens in society. Understanding that a lot of these kids were in there because they believed their favorite artists, and most of their favorite artists weren't even doing what they was talking about, because I knew them. So understanding that there was just this cycle that we were contributing to, that we were creating for our own brothers and and cousins and people that look like us to continue to fund this whole economic system. I said to myself when I came home that my message had to change to some level of degree. I knew that it had to be street based because I knew the people that I was targeting. I knew that they didn't want to hear me coming preaching to them. So I still had to talk about the streets, but it had to be something that was real and authentic. It had to be the realities of the street. Not that if you sell 1 million bricks, you're not going to jail. When you shoot somebody, you're just going to run around. No, you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life. The realities of the streets is you're going to have a good time for 2 years and you're going to do 50 years in prison. That's the reality. Anybody who tells you anything else is a liar. The people that they glorifying, the gangsters you look at every day on the TV that they put on the magazine, is either dead or in prison for the rest of their life. There's a 0.1% chance that you actually make it back to society after that reality. So that's when my music started being geared towards.
You gonna try to find you a job, but they ain't looking for a brother with no criminal charge. Now you sitting in the room arguing with your bra. She telling you, go get a job. You try to tell her it's hard, so she tell you, if you don't bring some money in here by tomorrow, sorry, but you gonna have to go live with your mom.
BX, Mysonne.
Yes, sir.
Everybody can't come up here.
No, sir. I got here, Flex. Flex, I'm here. I ain't come to play with him. Flex. This shit is light. I burn down mics and I fight for civil rights. I'm trying to get black, same shit they get a whites. I used to kill niggas, now I give them light. Now I give them light just to help them through that darkness. I motivate and I give hope to the heartless. My verse on that Million Man March was just to let my brothers know we can evolve from the projects. I know that's hard to digest, cause they feeding you pork. You see the image they project, they don't be what you thought. I don't blame them no more, it be what they taught. But ain't a nigga more thorough than me in New York. See, I can get a nigga snow, I can get it for the low, I can get it by the pound, I can get it by the O. I can get you pieces that's hitting, that's for show. But before I get you anything, I'ma let you know this shit is all a setup. They'll let you get your bread up. Next thing you know, you in State Greens getting the setup. Your man on the phone, he telling you keep your head up, while your girl got her mouth on his dick, giving your head up. And these niggas, they doing the most. They telling on themselves for likes on the post. Niggas want power just to brag in the boat. You see, it's way too many Tommies, not enough ghosts. But then again, Ghost was a rag. I live by the code, so I ain't co-signing that. The moral of the story is stop chasing the glory. My young is 16 on the island, facing 40. To the real G's, it's time to raise these shorties. To the kids I misled, I just want to say that I'm sorry. To the real G's, time to save these shorties. To the kids I misled, I just want to say that I'm sorry. Definition of a G Part 3, OG Bobby Johnson. I do this shit for real, Flex.
They see us?
They see us. I told you let me come up here, man. I told you what I do, man. Niggas gonna act like they forgot, man. I did this shit with DMX, nigga. Man for man, I did this shit with the Warrior.
Coming home, just grinding and trying to find my way because music had changed after 7 years. Just trying to find your way and understanding that things have changed and trying to navigate. You know, I started just paying attention to a lot of political issues because the same things that was going on in prison started out in the streets. So understanding that these issues were existing in the streets, and the Trayvon Martin case was one of the first things that really touched me, that moved me to activism.
Okay.
You know, I was doing this pilot for a show that we were supposed to put on a YouTube series, and we were in Florida while they were reading, you know, they were reading the verdict for George Zimmerman. And I was in my hotel room, and I never forget it. And I was going over my role and just kept trying to remember my part. But the TV was on blasting, so I would just automatically believe that he was definitely gonna be convicted. And I remember when they said he was innocent and not guilty, and I remember crying like I was 5 years old. Like I was in my room crying. At that time, my son was 12 years old, 13. I just kept saying, what am I gonna say to my son? Like, how do I explain to my son that you could get killed in America just for being black? Like, how do I, what is the words that I have to say to him? And then I ended up writing something called What Do I Say to My Son? And the director of the video, who was shooting the pilot, said he wanted to shoot a video for us. So we got home the next day. I wrote it in like 20 minutes because it was so real to me. And then we shot it that same day.
Wow.
So fast forward, I'm doing something, a charity event that a friend of mine's Mita that I met in the industry for years that always called me to do a lot of different charity events. And her and Tamika had collaborated on this charity event in Harlem for Christmas. And when we got there, we had remembered, because Tamika basically had stayed in my community years ago, and we had kind of remembered, like, Dad, I remember you from somewhere. We didn't exactly know where, but we kind of connected on that. And at that time, I also was doing physical training. And we started training together. I let her hear my music, and she was just like, yo, this song right here is so powerful. I want to introduce you to Carmen, who was with the Justice League. And then I started going to detention centers using music as an alternative to violence. And we started teaching that, and that was the first thing. But my first real activity was, like she said, the Eric Garner case, and that was the first march that I ever went to, and I felt just like this was my calling. Like I felt like my soul was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I utilized both, and I just connected music and activism and said, I have a platform, I have a voice, I have a skill, and people listen, so why not have something to say? Why not elevate something that really needs to be talked about?
So the Trayvon Martin verdict is read. That's happening in Florida. Your 12-year-old son is in the room. You start tearing. Then Eric Garner happens in your hometown. What did you feel immediately when that happened, when you saw it?
I felt outrage, because this was like the first era when we started really seeing everything on television. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you don't know what he did before that. No, like, we actually got to see it all play out. We actually seen them choke this man and him scream a bunch of times that he couldn't breathe, and we seen that. And and it was so outrageous to me that I was just taken back. And then it coupled with Trayvon Martin, it just added, it was like, no, they really just killing us. It's just, what are we gonna do? We can't just do nothing. Like, we don't have the right to do nothing. And just sit back and just allow, our lives are not even our own. This is a gift from God. We gotta fight back with our lives, to be peaceful is not to be passive.
Tamika, where were you when the Eric Garner incident kind of occurred? Were you at NAN, or were you...
No, I wasn't at NAN. I was on my own at that time. And, my consulting firm, I probably was working on like Source 360. I don't know. Might be one of those years.
Was it the year with well, no, Erica came after he passed.
Right, yeah. So... I was working on my own projects, but I've always been a movement baby.
Yes.
So wherever I was, somehow or another, I was doing something in this movement. And, when Eric Garner happened, again, like Mysonne said, like, we watched the man be choked to death. Like, we saw him go from life to death on camera. And it was almost like there's no way. But I think we say that all the time, Londell, in all these cases. There's no way this time they won't convict. They won't convict. They won't even indict, And, I think we immediately motivated. I was motivated to get involved, to try to support the Garner family. I have a good relationship with Miss Carr, Eric Garner's mom, and just to get involved. But I think for all of us, it was the non-indictment of Daniel Pantaleo. So we know we were outraged that he was killed, that Eric Garner was choked to death. But it was the non-indictment of the officer that sparked the movement. And if you think about it, this is coinciding with Mike Brown, because that's also happening out in Missouri. So you're dealing with Ferguson and the streets of New York on fire at the same time with movement, and we were just out there, out there marching, protesting. The movements were united. Folks from Ferguson were in New York. People from New York were going down to Ferguson, protesting with them, facing tear gas, militarized police all over. This was a real serious time in the movement for our generation,
Right.
Yeah.
So at this time, you all are doing your own thing. You're not leaders of a particular organization,
Right.
but you're leaders of your own soul and your own will. A lot of people want to figure out how they can get involved. What were you thinking about how you were going to approach getting involved? You're feeling outraged. You're seeing that this is going on around the country.
Right.
How do you press the button for yourself, and what do you recommend other people to press to get involved?
I think, and the reason why this partnership has been so important is because I recognize that the audience, so I'm considered to be a leader in this movement. And, while I like to think I'm pretty cool and cute, I'm not always able to go into a detention center or a high school to talk to some of our young people, because they don't necessarily feel like my message resonates with them. Maybe I don't have the right words, and that's cool. But it's important for us to engage people who come from the places that these young people recognize. Somebody, so when I met my son and I listened to his music, I'm like, yo, I need you. It's not even about you. I need you to come with me, because I got some young people we need you to talk to, some places we could take you. And I listened to his story. I did a few events that I was able to bring him even before some of my bougie friends. I brought him to events to talk about his experience, to talk about being being wrongfully convicted, you know, his career being put on hold based upon all of this. These were stories that I knew these stories were real, but it was like he gave me the opportunity to showcase it to the world. And, you know, and so I think, and for him, he didn't, which he could speak to it himself, but he didn't necessarily know how. So for people who are watching it, like, what am I supposed to do? I feel like engaging with people who actually do the work, but bringing your own flavor is super cool. You know, you might be a person who, I don't know, writes music. Who knows? You might just be an accountant. You could be anything, and find people, local grassroots organizations, show up and be like, listen, I want to donate my services because they need you. They may have a particular skill set, and then what you have, there you go. You building, and the movements grow and grow from there. So I was really encouraged to have a young man that I could actually point to and say, this is the story that we're talking about. And he's able to use his voice with my messaging to go into communities and speak to young people and move them closer to our cause.
And from your vantage point, how did you see?
From my vantage point, like, I never thought about being an activist. It wasn't something that I, you know, even considered. But everything that I always done was always based and built in authenticity and righteousness. You know, from like I remember being a kid in school that fought against the people that bullied somebody, that always wanted to protect. So that always been just like my nature. So, you know, coming into this space and realizing the time we were in and understanding the opportunity I had to actually lend my voice and pretty much bridge a gap. Because that's always what I used to say. I remember I always was the young kid that sat by the older kids and just listened. And they always wanted to talk to me because I would listen, I pay attention, and I would show them that I learned something. That's always who I was. Everybody wouldn't do that, and I used to try to figure out why. Because a lot of times, sometimes the person giving the message didn't intrigue them. See, me, I could get information from anybody. You didn't have to look one certain way for me to be able to get information. Some people are intrigued by the jewelry you had, or the name you had, the fame you had. And I understood coming back into society, unfortunately, this badge of honor that we give people who are incarcerated was given to me in a level of credibility, even though before that I was always respected, but it was a different level of credibility amongst a different level of individuals. So having that notoriety, having that ability, saying, okay, these people are good people. They just don't know nothing better because they've been taught wrong like I've been taught. So if we start giving them a different message, because they want to be active, a lot of these dudes in the street, they don't want to be in the streets. They want to do something better. So when you start giving them a different alternative and you give it to them in a manner that they can grab onto it, then you can see things change. I always used to say, I'm not going to be the older dude with the fish tank shoes that the kids don't want to listen to, because you just don't want to listen to them. The message is beautiful, but it has to be dressed up a certain way. So you have to teach people within their ignorance. And that's why they got cherry flavored cough drops, because people don't want to taste the medicine. So that's what it is for me. It's just like I figured out a way that I can bridge a gap and communicate with these youth to where they gravitate to it, and then they can understand, and then we can start bridging the gap between the older and the young.
Is that why your hat's to the back and mine is the front?
I mean, that's your thing.
No, because you got that.
You know, this is what I'm saying.
She mentioned the uniqueness of the partnership, right? And you mentioned being intrigued by different people. What do you think that Tamika has that has intrigued you, and what do you think that Mysonne has that has helped inspire you? And tell us what y'all kind of learned from each other.
Well, Tamika is just everyday person. You understand what I'm saying? When you don't know, you know, understanding the accolades that she receives and understanding what she's done around this world in the last year in particularly, and then understanding that she comes from same humble beginnings that we all come from. She goes through the same things that we all come from. She's just as from the hood, just like the rest of us. It gives you a sense of reality and authenticity, something that you can grab onto. I don't want to be next to anything that's not authentic. And Tamika from day one was authentic. She said what she was going to do. She came the way she was. She was like, listen, look, I'm from the hood. Like, and we had real conversations. So I started to say, yo, she real, just like somebody that from the hood that nobody knows. So understanding that she had so much credibility in the space, that she had so much ability, had done so much, and she was still relatable, was like, okay, that's what I want to do. It looks like that. Like Tamika comes here with her shorts, and she might come to a rally with some Louboutins on or
Louboutins.
Look. Now she says Louboutins.
Do they have any Louboutins with rubber on the bottom yet?
Yeah, she got all that.
Yeah, you have to have it, done.
Yeah.
I got all of them.
Oh, you got it.
So,
But they're not meant to feel good. So
yeah, so she made it cool. She made activism cool for me. Because that's what it has to be for these kids. When these young girls look, they don't want to look like something that they can't really relate to. You know what I'm saying? So, and I know that what the guys look at it, when they look at activism, they don't want to be like, oh, we got to wear a suit, and we got to go to church. I remember I was in the strip club, and DJ Self came up to me and was like, yo, what you doing here? I'm like, same thing you doing. I'm enjoying the show like you. I'll give me some drinks. He's like, I'm saying, but you in the movement. I said, where y'all get this false sense that you being in the movement and you active, and just because I don't want to see my people get killed, that I don't want to enjoy myself the same way you do. I ain't in here doing nothing illegal, right? This ain't illegal. Mm-hmm. So he was like, nah, you're right. And that's what I want to train the mind. It ain't about you being some stiff, and you don't got to go to church every day to be an activist. You don't got to do none of that. You just got to want to believe in what's right and being able to sacrifice yourself for the greater good and the cause of the people.
But going to church is cool.
But I do, that's right. I was going to say, because I also go to church, right? Yeah. And I think wearing a suit is cool. Like, if that's who you are, then that's good too. But it's cool that we can stand next to each other. The person that's got the suit on, that's, going to church, because you got a lot of young people that's growing up like that, and they could stand next to the person from their community that doesn't necessarily have that. I think that is one of the biggest problems we have in movements in general. All of these different divisions, you look a certain way, or you speak a certain way, or you don't speak a certain way. You're not as educated, and therefore you don't fit. We can't have that. We need to be, in our movements, we need to make space for everybody. So the person now I was not at the strip club with my son. So let's just be very clear about that. But
he did that on his own.
Yeah, he did that on his own time. Not saying I never been, but I wasn't at that. But anyway, the person that's on the stripper pole, all the way to, the person that might be a med student.
They're human too.
Everybody should be allowed to be in the movement. And in fact, my feeling is that the person that's on the stripper pole sometimes is even more relevant to the work that we're trying to do, because that's the person that's actually experiencing all the different intersections of oppression. Everything is hitting them. They trying to, maybe trying to make money to pay tuition so they could, go to college. They live in the hood. They got all these different things going on. And so they actually the people that we really are speaking to in this movement. And so I don't think that anyone should be excluded, or, I think everybody should be at the table.
Thousands of Americans at this hour are descending on Washington, D.C.
Thousands of women are marching today in cities across the country. Rallies
over 600 of these marches in all.
The Women's March on Washington had already become the largest inauguration protest in history.
Yes, we can! Yes, we can!
Not hate makes America great!
Take it back with you to wherever it is that you came from.
I always tell people, you can't lead from an elite position where you sitting in the ivory tower and looking down on people. If you're not actually on the ground touching your people, how do you know the issues and the concerns? They need to be at the table. They have to be a part of what it is that we're building together. That was one of the reasons why I joined the Women's March, because I felt like, how can any group of women, particularly white women, go and say that they speak on behalf of all women, and we as women of color are not at the table, that our voices are not present. I'm not saying that everything is perfect and that the space always feels comfortable, but certainly our issues were going to be a part of the platform on January 21st, 2017, when 5 million people marched, and we were going to let some other folks have that platform. Nah, we built that table together. So, when I think about, you asked what are the attributes, I think I said a lot about what it was about my son. I felt like he could help me translate my message even to my own child. I had a 19-year-old son who, as soon as I finish, you know, wilding on him for whatever his issues are, he calls my son to try to get a different understanding of what is my mother saying, you know, or for him to be able, for Mice to be able to come back to me and help to try to articulate it. And he does that with so many young people. I know that they don't always get it from me. So I appreciate that about him, the time that he takes. But I think the thing that the thing that I appreciate the most about my son, and if Linda Sarsour, who's the Muslim sister from Brooklyn, my Palestinian sister, and Carmen, and
shout out to Linda, shout out to
Carmen, and you know, Bob, and just all those, you know, that are around, people who've been organizing in this
Bob
space.
And Janae,
all of them. When my son came into the space, I think for us, it was like first of all, a breath of fresh air, because he talks a lot about the authenticity piece, but it was also a lot of motivation. It was like his trials and tribulations in life, and the fact that he made it through these 7 years, coming home knowing that he should be in one position, but because of all of the things that have happened to him, he wasn't there. And then seeing that he wasn't like angry and walking around, you know, mad at the world, he was still pushing forward and still trying to, and then he just encouraged all of us. He encourages us every day. So when we start complaining, he's like, yo, let me tell you about what's really going on, so you can understand how your situation is not that bad. And I'm OCD as heck. So I'm always like, Mice, don't touch that. Don't stand on that wall. Don't do this. He's like, yo, man, I was in jail, man. Like, it's not that serious.
Perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. So the one word I've heard the most since we started talking has been the word movement. Yeah. So let's define that word for the audience, because it means perhaps the same thing to many, but maybe something different, or to some it's kind of agnostic. People don't know what it means, right? So, well, what does movement mean to you, and who and what's moving?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's it. That's the key part of movement. It's moving, doing something. Movement means identifying the issues that matter to you, and then figuring out who are the people that you need to be working with, and the places that you need to be to bring your issues to the forefront. If that's voting people in and out of office, if that's raising resources to be able to, you know, provide opportunities to kids in your neighborhood that's got guns instead of books, you know, it means a lot of different things. But the main piece of it is all of us involved in something and moving in a lane, doing something that is about the healing of our communities.
My son, what's movement to you?
Movement to me, you know, movement to me is understanding the plight of our people. Just understanding where we are in society, understanding the history of where we are. And when you look at where we are, James Baldwin said to be black and conscious in America is to be constantly outraged and enraged. And rather than just be angry, it's finding a way to change that, utilizing your voice, utilizing something that you have to change our position in society. Like you look, you know, that's why I think Kanye's statements angered me so much. You know, that slavery was a choice. When you look through our history and you look at how we fought to get through slavery, how some of us gave our lives, how some of our grandmothers sacrificed to work every day just so we could be here, you know, just to understand the plight of the black man in America and the black woman in America, and understand that we actually have more opportunities, and so we should be engaging more to continue that fight, to make it even better for the next generation. So that's what movement is for me. Movement is constantly moving, doing something to increase and better our position in space in this world. You know, especially in America, we've done so much. And when you look and understand that, when you look at where we are, to not acknowledge that we definitely don't have the space that we should as black people in America, like, it's that you just don't want to acknowledge it. If you understand, if you look at any black person of power or position, whatever, and you look at their white counterpart, you see the difference. You understand. You know, Kanye's first argument was that there was a ceiling there, that he couldn't be Ralph Lauren, and that no matter how talented he was, they wouldn't allow him to get past a certain position. And that's the reality of being black in America. So
and that's where so many fell in love with him because of that honesty.
Because that honesty. So my movement for me is constantly trying to break that ceiling. Every day trying to push that ceiling to where there's nothing there, that nothing that, you know, separates us from reaching our fullest potential.
If God came and said, this is it, and I need to use you, you're prepared to give your life for that. The part that is scary is dying for nothing.